Okay, so our next speaker is my good friend Damien Parr. Damien is at the Center for Agroecology and Sustainable Food Systems at UC Santa Cruz, where he coordinates a lot of their research and educational activities. Damien.
So welcome, Damien Parr is my name. I'm at UC Santa Cruz, the Center for Agroecology and Sustainable Food Systems. And I wanted to focus primarily on the undergraduate piece of the abstract. If you read the abstract, it's looking at really how do we optimize the integration between undergraduates and beginner farmer programming. And I'm going to emphasize the undergraduate side of this. Since the beginner farmer program, the Center for Agroecology has been running an apprenticeship program for over 40 years. That's pretty well established as any in the country. And whereas the undergraduate student programming has kind of come and gone, waxed and waned, but has never really been quite substantial in terms of numbers of students served and the ways in which they were served. So I will try to run through this a little bit quickly, and since we have a bit of time, just in case I wasn't hitting the mark in terms of your interest, we can get deeper into questions. So if you want to bring me back into the apprenticeship beginner farmer side, I can delve into that. So an overview, these are some of the questions that we were looking to cover across the panel in terms of the goals of the program, how do we assess their learning, and addressing the needs of the students and the organic farming community, and then some ideas around educational materials. So I'm going to try this. I don't know if this is online, but we're going to find out, and if not, we might do some trouble. Okay, I'm going to move on from this because it's not working. What I was attempting to show you was a video that was produced by students sharing on their experiential learning. I think we'll just skip it for now. It would have been some nice visuals and audio for folks who aren't familiar with the center and its 30 acres of production. So it is focused on organic farming in a diversified, intensive production system that's both row crop and market gardens, and primarily direct marketing, but increasingly farm to college in our case, but farm to institutions. So some larger bulk marketing as well. And so we have in the apprenticeship program running all year round, but mostly April through October, an intensive residential, about 4 days a week, full-time, 1 day a week of class instruction. But the farm is, this 30 acres, this farm is being managed by professional staff, but then the apprentices are doing pretty much all the labor that constitutes the production and marketing. And we have primarily mixed vegetable, but also flowers in the production, and a number of fruits, including orchards. So the undergraduate students, whereas the undergraduate students are coming in for shorter stints in terms of class labs, but also going through our internship program. And so I'm going to describe how our internships, which have more time investment in integration with the production and the research activities, I'm going to explain some of that. So some of the goals here that the internship has is to really facilitate the personal and professional development of the students as agroecologists and organic farmers and gardeners. Now, this doesn't mean necessarily that they're all going to turn out being that in terms of their professional careers, but we are inviting them into typically an introductory level and then more advanced opportunities to try on the shoes of what professional agroecologists and organic farmers do with their time, how they think, so how to be like these professional career tracks. And to do that, we provide this context-rich, practically based these field experiences. And they're in a project-based context, so there is production and research activities and demands for the management of those projects that are going on. And so our students are able to plug into authentic, purposeful activities and are provided the context of how these production and research activities relate to broader topics and issues around food justice and sustainable agriculture, ecology, et cetera. And so let's say lastly we get into developing their knowledge and skills relating to the academic curriculum. So we link this back to their degree programs, the curriculum in their degree programs. In terms of beginner farmers, to go back to that track, it's all for the purpose of the last presentation. I mean, people going out into becoming successful producers, in this case organic, diversified small scale typically. So for the academic side, though, we're really linking these to learning outcomes within our degree program. So I wanted to speak a little bit about what we're really facilitating there in their personal and professional development. And so borrowing from some educational learning theory, a lot of folks have heard of Bloom, but this idea that we can break up these different learning processes into an affective and cognitive and psychomotor areas. And again, in our context, we have students that are actually engaging in practical work in addition to readings and being engaged in lectures and discussions and that sort of thing. And I want to emphasize here, it's kind of interesting that the comment around the farming practice. Everyone understands the fundamentals of agriculture relating to soil and all the technical information that goes along with, say, soils. In our case, we're in your case, it's business is the big okay, well, it's actually not that difficult, or at least it's a kind of something that needs to get managed at all times, but really some of the biggest obstacles are not in what we'd consider as kind of traditional production issues. And in our case here, and you can see I'm focusing on education here, the education is most often overlooked. The kind of social process in which learning happens is most often overlooked and therefore not really utilized as a tool and in a place to empower one's programs and the outcomes. And so I want to say a few things about education as a social process and this idea of enhancing a zone of proximal development. That sounds like kind of fancy terms, but basically we want to put people together in environments where they're learning from each other, in the way that you discussed mentor farmers coming into your 3-day intensive, really looking at how do we place students together who are along a developmental trajectory, but at different levels, and including the other folks in that learning environment, in our case, apprentices that are beginner farmers. So we have undergraduates who are trying on these ideas around agriculture, working side by side with people who have already made decisions about going into production for themselves as business, and then working with managers and other professional staff. And I want to emphasize within that the importance of the affective domain, and this being issues of motivation and a sense of purpose. Thanks. Motivations and a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging. These kind of issues that when not really addressed, if people don't feel like they belong or they're familiar and they're at ease in an environment, they can be really distracting and create anxiety and block people's otherwise their cognitive functioning and their psychomotor functioning. So in other words, if people aren't feeling connected and have a sense of motivation, a clear sense of purpose and belonging to this community of learners in that space, it really undermine the learning outcomes that we get. So focusing on this social environment, the process of learning as a social process and really enhancing the placement of people who are at different levels of development next to each other, working in a purposeful, project-based setting is what we're about. We can call it, these are some fancy words that you might want to, if you want to get into this work a little deeper and think about the principles and applying it to your own educational program, the ideas of situated learning and legitimate peripheral participation in communities of practice, right? There's about 10 special words. Very exciting things if you want to look into these issues. It just means simply that you take people who are less experienced and you put them next to people that have a little bit more experience, and then you put them next to people with even a little more experience, and you put them all into a project that is authentic. There's something that's actually trying to get accomplished in this setting, and everyone has access to someone who's a little more experienced than them, has a little more knowledge about these things, and you basically start arranging people in proximity to each other, working together, where folks can then become part of that community who's working to accomplish something on that project. in those types of dynamics and settings, we see the most accelerated development for people. And it's not just the cognitive, again, it's really their sense of becoming whatever that is. And in our case, we're talking about agricultural practitioners or scientists. So it's becoming that as an identity. That's very much an affective issue. So the internship program, we run essentially 10 to 18 interns for either 6 or 12 hours a week. So they're coming out basically 3 days a week in the mornings, and they're engaging in all the same production and research activities that the apprentices are, for the most part, and they're working alongside of them in many cases. And there are in our case some very substantial USDA-funded research activities, and they're headed by faculty, and their lab staff are running those operations and controlling those more closely. So there is some separation between our general internship programming and, say, a faculty research lab that's taking care of an experiment. But generally speaking, in those settings, you have a similar setup where there's graduate students who are mentoring undergraduate students, and the faculty are mentoring the grad students. So there's this graduation of learners and a very purposeful project in that case. The apprentices that are running the intensive six-month period are, there's 3 different sites, and we have market garden, hand cultivated, and then tractor cultivated. There's 3 different sites, and each site will have about 15 apprentices working there with people that have been through the apprenticeship program the year before. They're called second years. They're basically teaching assistants to the site managers. So again, you have this graduated level, these opportunities for development within proximal zones. You can also call it mentoring. I mean, just making intensive social engagement. So in my own computer, and in terms of the resources that I can share with other folks, we've developed very specific learning outcomes, the objectives we have for that, and some assessment protocols and materials that we can share. I have a Mac and this is a PC, and it was too much detail. It would be best done in an Excel sheet where you can see essentially, we identified, say, within cultivation or crop production, irrigation, weed management, those sorts of things. There's levels of development in terms of, say, abstract conceptual knowledge, and then areas of skill development that relates to the basic activities that the students are having in the field. But we've also identified a number of the outcomes that relate to the idea of internship programming in general, practicing things like reflective thinking and self-directed learning. And we've linked all these things to our undergraduate degree program goals. In our case, very much a interdisciplinary and applied form of scholarship. So we are nesting essentially the internship within our curriculum and our degree program learning outcomes that we're interested in. And we run them at the beginning of our internships, the middle, and the end. And these are 10-week periods. We're on a quarter system in the UC. So to link to this question about serving the needs of students and serving the needs of organic farmers, or how these things might relate, we have a number of both practical production-based trials and experiments going that are not academic for publication, that sort of field research approach. So in other words, best practices around irrigation and water use. So trialing some technologies like tensiometers to get at soil moisture at different depths, and in California especially reducing our water use in drought periods. We have doing cost analysis on, say, winter cut flower production, so doing actual looking at all the costs involved in the production, including all the labor and how much time it takes to harvest, and doing varietal trials at the same time. So we have CDF, California Department of Food and Agriculture, grants, for example, that are simply for us to promote and advanced specialty crops. And so we'll be running grant-funded projects in that area and have students involved in that in that project on a field basis. And then we also have the research that's taking place that's more for publication purposes in faculty labs or managing. But nonetheless, both of these contexts, our undergraduate are involved, and the findings of which are directly related to certainly our regional producers. So they produce results that are linked to the interests and the needs of the regional farmers in our area. So for those folks who want to actually dig into some of this stuff, I put these publications up here because in the reference sections of them, the papers have a fair bit of lit review and kind of explaining the background on educational learning theory that would inform the way we design our curriculum, and then the pedagogical aspects of how we engage the students. So these are some papers. I want to move on to questions for folks so we can drive it into what's relevant to you. These are some contacts of people who are working on the internship programming at CASPAS if you want to contact them directly. Yeah.